Today we're going to show you how to find and book Emirates first class flights using miles.
Yeah, well, this is big news because now you can no longer use Emirates Skywards miles to book unless you have elite status with Emirates Skywards. So for a long time, it was possible to transfer from a number of different transferable currencies to Emirates, and then anyone was able to book first class. But again, you can only do that nowadays if you have Emirates elite status, silver status, or higher will do. So you could get elite status with Emirates by opening one of their credit cards. Both of their credit cards, at least at the time that we're recording this, offer elite status and ways to spend towards it. But if you want to use partner miles to book Emirates first class, there are still a couple of options out there. They've cut off most partners at this point, but not all of them.
Yeah. So surprisingly, both Air Canada and Qantas have the ability to use their miles to book Emirates first class. We're going to talk about Qantas because Air Canada Aeroplan charges ridiculous award prices to book Emirates first class. Qantas, though, isn't that bad. Qantas has an award chart where they base the award prices by distance flown, and so the shorter Emirates flights are cheaper, and it gets more expensive as you go to longer distance flights. But you can get some nice flights for a reasonable number of points with Qantas. Now, you might be wondering, how do you get Qantas miles? You can transfer one-to-one from either Amex membership rewards, Citi thank you points, or Capital One miles.
Yeah, and before we even talk about how many miles you'll need to redeem, I want to just riff off of what Greg said a second ago, where he said you can get some pretty nice flights for a reasonable number of miles. And of course, the reason we're talking about Emirates First Class, maybe we should back up to that, is that Emirates First Class is probably the blingiest first class in the sky. Now, it's debatable as to whether or not it's the best. There are a lot of different measurements as to what makes the world's best first class. But I think that there's not an argument to be made that anybody has a blingier, more decked out and like
Sure.
shiny gold cabin than Emirates First Class. They've got a shower in first class on the A380. They have more than one first class product. It's worth mentioning. But on the A380, you'll get a shower. The floor is heated, so your tootsies don't get cold when you're walking around. It's a very nice experience. Of course, free flowing Dom Perignon champagne. You can get caviar. There's good food, great service. So it's a special experience. It's different than your typical first class, even, and certainly far different than your typical flight.
Yeah, it really is a very special experience. I love the one chance I had to fly Emirates first class so far, and that was with Nick on a pretty short flight from, what was it? It was from Dubai to the Maldives, I think. Is that right?
It was,
And
yeah, which is a little less than 5 hours. So not
yeah,
the full experience, but not bad.
right. It's one of those flights where you're enjoying yourself so much you really wish it was longer rather than the other way around. So anyway, let me give you some examples of how much it would cost to book Emirates first class with Qantas miles. Emirates has a flight between Miami and Bogota, Colombia, where you could fly. You could book it for 64,500 Qantas points plus about $100 in fees.
Wow.
Now, what will
It's got to be a
probably
pretty
be
short flight, though,
that's a
right?
short flight. I think less than 4 hours. I think.
Hmm.
So you'll get the bling,
Yeah.
but it's yeah. I'm not sure I would go way out of my way just to fly that. But if you're going to Bogota anyway, that might be worth splurging on that part of the flight.
Well, yeah, I
Um,
mean, the way you got to look at it is if you're going to spend 40,000 miles to fly business class on somebody else, or I'm just making that number up, but if
yeah,
that were the number, then you might say, well, for 50% more, I could fly super blingy. And so
right.
maybe, if you got a lot of points, that might be pretty attractive.
Right, right. But what will probably be a lot more attractive to a lot of this audience is that there are two flights between the United States and Europe that fly Emirates and are reasonably priced. Now, depends what you consider reasonable, but at least compared to how much Air Canada would charge, they're reasonably priced with Qantas points. So one of the routes is Newark to Athens, and that one costs 129,300 Qantas points and about $100 in fees. And then there's between JFK and Milan, and that one is only 107,700 points. Plus, if you're going Milan to JFK, it's about 120. It's 127 euros in fees. I imagine it's around $100 going the other way. I couldn't find any availability the other way to check what the actual fees were. And now,
I
if you
mean,
want to,
that's a lot of points.
it's a lot of points. It's a nice long flight. I think around
Yeah,
nine-ish hours, something like that.
somewhere in there.
And so you would get the full experience, I think. So it should be very nice. Now, if you want to fly all the way to Dubai, depending on where you start in the U.S., the price will vary. So if you start from the East Coast, like the Northeast Coast, it's going to be cheaper than if you fly from Chicago, which is going to be cheaper than flying from, LA. I only recorded one price, which is from the Northeast Coast. So JFK to Dubai is 149,800 points. So let's call it 150,000 points plus $835. So pretty hefty surcharges on
Ouch.
that route.
Yeah, well, that's the big problem, right? I mean, if you're going to redeem miles for Emirates these days to fly in a premium cabin in business or first class, the surcharges are high. There's no other way to put it. They're high if you're flying most of their routes. The exceptions are the routes between Miami and Bogota and between New York or Newark and Milan or Athens, those flights between
Yeah.
North America and Europe. They can still have reasonable surcharges. Now, I emphasize the word can because sometimes if they only have, I think it's what they call flex availability, kind of their version of anytime availability, then the surcharges go up. And so they're not only $100. So if you look it up and you see high surcharges, that's because that's not like the equivalent of a safer award, essentially. So, at 107,000 miles one way, if you're flying New York to Milan, that's around what it will cost you to fly first class if you were going to fly another carrier in first class to Europe, because there aren't very many opportunities to fly first class to Europe. You've got Singapore flying JFK to Frankfurt, and you've got Lufthansa basically, and then of course and Air France, but you need to have elite status with Air France to book La Première, and
Yeah.
same thing with Swiss.
Well, and you have British Airways, but their first class isn't very highly regarded. And so, yeah.
Yeah, so this is one of the few, and it's around ballpark what you would pay to fly
Right.
those others, depending on which type of miles you'd use. So it's not an unreasonable number of miles through that
Yep.
lens. Of course, through the other lens, you might look and see that economy class from JFK to Milan is sometimes as cheap as 17,500 miles through Emirates and like $50. So unlike many routes where first or business class is only maybe 50% more or double the cost of economy. In this case, it's like 5 or 6 times the cost of an economy class ticket. So it's a pretty big splurge. Now, that said, if you're going to do it, I would recommend doing it between JFK and Milan because that's an A380. I think they're still flying a 777 between Newark and Athens. Is that right? Do you recall?
I don't know off the top of my head.
I believe so. And so they both have first class, but the A380 has sort of the fuller first class experience in the sense that it has the shower, the 777 doesn't. The suites look very similar between the A380 and the 777. Now, I said that, and if you've seen on social media images of what many people refer to as Emirates Game Changer First Class, which is their newer version of first class, that is a version of first class that they don't fly, at least at the time we're recording this, between New York and Europe or Newark and Europe. So that's not one you're going to be able to redeem Qantas points on without paying high surcharges. And so that's the trade-off there, that you would need to use a fair amount of cash to pay the surcharges. Now, that said, Emirates charges a lot of money for these flights in first class. So it's not necessarily a bad value compared to the cash price. But if you'd never consider paying the cash price, it's up in the air. Would you consider spending $800 to fly to Europe? If you would, and you have a lot of miles, maybe this could make it a really special experience if you're taking a special trip. Is it something you do every day? Probably not.
Yep. Yeah. Well said. All right, let's take a look at how to find awards that are bookable with
Hmm.
Qantas miles to fly Emirates First Class.
Oh, great. Show me.
The best way, I think, to find awards bookable with Qantas points on Emirates is with a pro subscription to Seats.Aero. Seats.Aero just makes it so easy to find these. And what I would do is, if you're just very flexible with dates, use Explore Qantas because we're looking to use Qantas points to fly Emirates. And now let's say you want to fly between North America and Europe on Emirates First Class. What you'll want to do is change these drop downs so it defaults to North America to anywhere. Change that to Europe. I have my Seats.Aero set to always show a full year by default, but you might have it set to only show the first 60 days by default. So switch to a full year. And then what you want to do is do the drop down for airlines. Look for Emirates and just check that box. That filters the results to flights by Emirates. And then simply click on the first setting over on the right, and that sorts to the flights bookable with Qantas points, flying Emirates in first class. And so what you see is only from North America to Europe, only Newark to Athens is available. JFK to Athens is not available for the nonstop. So what you're finding here is one that it's probably flying through Dubai, and that's why it costs so much. But the ones to Athens are are reasonable, very reasonable surcharges, $101.50, and a middling amount of points, 129,300. Now, to look the other direction for Europe to North America, you want to fly home, just click this button. Okay, now it's retained the setting of sorting by first class, and now we have one flight that has availability flying from Milan to JFK for only 107,700 points and $127 in fees. So that's excellent. And if the last scene that this one says just now, which so it means it's valid these results. But if it says something like 14 hours ago, what you want to do is click the little info indicator here and switch to the first class tab and wait for it to finish refreshing. And if that flight is still available, it'll still show here. Otherwise, it'll say first class is not available. So in that case, it was. And let's say you want to book this. Let's say you want to book this Athens to Newark flight. You can just click here to book via Qantas. And this takes you to Qantas's award booking screen. You want to make sure this rewards thing is turned on. It is here. And make sure you fill out, if it's not automatically filled out, the parts that you wanted. So this was Athens to Newark on March 13th of next year. So we'll change that to Athens and Newark. And March 13th. And press continue to search. It's going to ask you, it's going to tell you some important information, and you just have to click continue. And by scrolling down, you could see that the flight that we wanted is there. Of course, if you wanted more than one person, you'd have to put in multiple people into the search screen to see if there's availability for two or more.
Very cool.
All right, so that's how you could quickly find award availability on Emirates First Class using Qantas points. If you don't find what you need, it's a really good idea to set up an alert to search for the specific routes you're interested in, and then you'll get an email when availability appears.
Alerts can be a really powerful tool because they can do all the searching for you. You can go on with your day-to-day life and not have to obsess over finding availability. Let an award search tool do it for you.